Welcome back. This is the third part of the episode on how to code your EA to achieve unity of behaviour between backtesting and live trading when using the open prices model and the M1 data model in MT5. In part 1 we covered the theory, which you need to understand before trying to understand the code, and in part 2 we looked at the actual code for a single symbol EA. In this part, we cover the code to achieve identical behaviour, but for a multi-symbol EA. Now, if you need links to parts 1 and 2, you can find them below in the description. So when I look at this version, I'm only going to look at how the code for the multi-symbol EA is different to that of the single symbol EA. So you do need to watch part 2 first if you want the full explanation. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so the first difference we can see here is with this additional input parameter, where we're specifying the symbols that we want to trade. And associated to that, we also have this global variable which stores the number of tradable symbols, and the symbol array here which makes processing of those symbols easier. Now, because we're dealing with multi-symbols here, we have to have an array also for the variable to store the time that the last tick was processed, because this will be different for each symbol, because each of those symbols will have ticks coming in at different times. So as you saw in the previous tutorial on how to code a multi-symbol EA, we use the same statement here, which does two things. It populates the symbol array with the string that was set here in the input variable, using the pipe as a delimiter, and at the same time it also gives us the number of tradable symbols so that when we loop through them we know exactly how many iterations we need to perform. And we just resize and initialize the last tick processed variable for each of those symbols. And then the remainder of the onInit function is identical to the single symbol version. So if we now move on to onTick, again, we increment the ticks received count, and remember the way that MT5 works is that onTick gets called whenever a new tick for the current chart arrives. So if you're running on the euro-dollar chart, then it will be initiated every time a new euro-dollar tick arrives. So what we have to do now is to iterate through each of the symbols in our array. And whereas before we were using the built-in symbol function here, we now have to use the current symbol representing the symbol that we're currently processing in the loop. And of course, the value of the date and time when that was processed has to be stored in this array value appropriate to the symbol. But other than that, the code here is identical to that in the single symbol version. So still within our symbol loop, we now determine whether we have to process this particular tick. And clearly here you'll need some mechanism of passing through to your trade closures and trade opens functions which symbol it is you're actually processing. So as you can see here in the trade closures function, we use symbol loop here in order to set the current symbol, and when we execute the copy buffer command, we have to make sure that we're retrieving the indicator values for the appropriate symbol. If that's a little bit confusing, you might want to watch the tutorial where I specifically went into the details of how to code a multi-symbol EA, and then I'm sure it will become clear. And then finally, we output the information again to the screen. But because we're dealing with multi-symbols, there's a little bit more information we need to output here, so let's now take a look at that. So we'll run the EA for the default symbols that are set in the input variable, and we'll just show the processing for the new M1 bar. So as soon as we run, you notice we get 4 bars processed, one for each of the symbols. And then we've just got a new minute bar come in, and so we have another 4. So we've now processed 8. Now remember, the ticks received are for euro-dollar, but when we're looking to see whether we have processed this for one of the specific symbols that we're looking at, we are using the values for those specific symbols. Now in this example, if we were using this setting both in the backtester and in live trading, it means that again we've got like for like behavior, because we'll only be processing the open tick from each new M1 bar in the backtester and also doing exactly the same in live trading. So we've got that unity that we need between the two scenarios. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. By taking this approach, it will help you to achieve backtest results that are much more representative of your expected live results when using open prices and the M1 data models in backtesting. Please give me a thumbs up if you've benefited from the video in any way. As I said before, there are probably multiple ways of achieving this. I've just shown you how I do it in my own code. But if you can think of any improvements to these methods, then please let me know in the comments below. It would be great to hear your suggestions, and then maybe I can improve my own code based on them. Now, this was the third episode of the Advanced MQL Coding Techniques series. In episode 1, I covered how to code a multi-symbol EA, and then in episode 2, I looked at coding your own custom performance metric to measure the success of your system as part of the optimization process. So be sure to check those out if you haven't already. So that now brings us to the end of this episode, and until next time, trade safe.